The 78th floor of Zenith Capital was not merely an office space. It was an extreme, exaggerated psychological construct of wealth, power, and merciless ambition. It was a space designed to exert control, simply through its overwhelming opulence. The air itself was filtered and conditioned to a perfect, sterile 72 degrees Fahrenheit, devoid of any human scent, only carrying the faint metallic aroma of new money in distant, churning financial markets. The floors were laid with imported Carrara marble, meticulously sourced from Italy, polished to such an impossible, mirror-like sheen that they perfectly reflected the cold, indifferent silhouettes of the Manhattan skyline. The walls were clad in rare Brazilian rosewood, subtly illuminated by recessed, anti-glare lighting that deliberately eliminated any shadow of imperfection or doubt. Every object, every piece of furniture was a deliberate, expensive statement. The only disruption to this perfect, corporate mausoleum during the deepest hours of the morning was the presence of Elias Vance. Elias was the overnight custodial engineer, arriving with the first hint of dull, pre-dawn gray light, precisely at 5 a.m. His routine was a profound ritual, a silent performance of humility, precision, and absolute control. He moved through the deserted, pristine hallways with a soft, almost spiritual shuffle, his footsteps muffled and absorbed by the thick, sound-dampening executive carpet. He carried his meager tools, a worn, heavy-duty mop bucket, a selection of specialized, high-grade, gentle cleaning solutions that cost a fortune, but were used only on the finest surfaces, and a simple, utilitarian blue cotton uniform that stood in deliberate, stark, almost defiant contrast to the hundreds of thousands of dollars of tailoring worn by the men who would soon arrive to command the markets. Elias, a man whose quiet dignity and profound intelligence were constantly, systematically misinterpreted as simple, elderly weariness, was the only true, silent witness to the remnants of their high-stakes, chaotic lives. He meticulously emptied the overflowing, discarded remnants of half-smoked, imported Cuban cigars, brands so rare they were almost priceless. He gently wiped the sticky rings left by stale, $20 artisanal coffee cups, and quietly gathered the thousands of scattered, printed memos detailing transactions that possessed potential to destabilize entire national economies. The employees, the financial titans who wielded this terrifying power, never knew his name. They simply never lowered their gaze long enough to acknowledge him as a person. He was a Papasley Adam, the mop and bucket man, a forgotten, interchangeable, and utterly overlooked piece of maintenance equipment, a perfect cover. Elias's body carried a slight, deliberate stoop, a posture that symbolized a man shouldering the physical and ethical weight of the world's deep indifference. The deep lines etched on his face were not the product of hard physical labor, but the relentless internal, exhausting processing of complex global financial information and the silent burden of maintaining a 20-year secret that could alter the course of modern finance. Among the financiers who occupied this floor, one stood out for his persistent, toxic, and explosive arrogance: Marcus Thorne. Marcus, 35 years old, was a physical embodiment of aggressive, superficial ambition, a senior portfolio manager who operated as if the global markets were his personal sandbox, his only goal being to assert his dominance. His bespoke suit, tailored in Savile Row, London, was not just clothing. It was a deliberate, aggressive statement of supreme status, designed to communicate a false, narcissistic sense of superiority to everyone he encountered. Marcus utilized his perceived power and staggering wealth not for intelligent strategy or ethical management, but for the sheer, cruel, and constant pleasure of asserting his dominance and actively belittling those he considered beneath him, specifically the custodial staff. To Marcus, Elias Vance was subhuman, an inanimate object deserving only of his contempt, correction, and periodic public humiliation. Every morning, Marcus would arrive, perpetually late and aggressively stressed, and would use Elias's immediate, unavoidable proximity as an excuse for an act of petty, venomous tyranny. This daily interaction was not merely accidental. It was a required ritual for Marcus's own psychological validation. He desperately needed to prove, through the verbal degradation of another human being, that he was indeed superior and powerful. Elias Vance's current, profoundly humble existence was the final, impenetrable, and most sophisticated layer of camouflage for a man who, 2 decades earlier, was not merely known but was universally feared and revered across the global trading floors as the legendary The Silent Wolf. The name was whispered in hushed, almost mythical tones, reserved only for the elite few who remember the seismic, global shift he caused. Elias was a true financial prodigy, a generational talent who, by the astonishing age of 28, had not only single-handedly developed but flawlessly implemented a series of unprecedented, highly complex, high-frequency trading algorithms that literally anticipated and executed trades faster than the human central nervous system could react. He generated multi-billions of dollars not through petty manipulation, but through sheer, unparalleled mathematical foresight, ethical trading, and intellectual dominance. His sudden, absolute self-exile began after a devastating, existential internal conflict. When the most powerful shadow figures on Wall Street demanded he immediately adapt his cutting-edge algorithms for systemic, unethical, and illegal market manipulation, a world-changing scheme codenamed Project Midas, Elias refused with cold finality. He stood absolutely firm on his unshakable ethical code, leading to his name being unjustly, maliciously tarnished in a fabricated corporate scandal designed to destroy and silence him. In response, Elias systematically liquidated his entire, staggering fortune, a financial fortress built on integrity that current Zenith CEOs could only dream of accessing, and vanished without a digital trace. He completely erased his digital ghost, adopted a new, utterly bland and anonymous life, and began his self-imposed penance as a janitor. His presence at Zenith Capital was not a coincidence. It was a culmination of a decade-long, grim, and personal justice mission. The company's original founder, a close, trusted, and lifelong friend who was the only person who knew Elias's full truth, had recently died under circumstances that Elias, through his own deep investigation, suspected were far from natural. Elias's covert mission was surgically simple: observe the ethical and structural collapse of the firm from the inside, identify the corrupt, malignant core, and wait for the single, critical, and unmissable moment to intervene, restore his friend's ethical legacy, and dismantle the corruption. He existed in perfect, unshakable plain sight, a shadow with liquid net worth that effortlessly dwarfed the entire company's current market equity. The slow-burning, underlying tension between the arrogant manager, Marcus Thorne, and the silent millionaire, Elias Vance, finally ignited into open flame on a turbulent Wednesday. Marcus had spent the previous 72 hours in a state of frenetic, desperate anticipation, working feverishly, sleeping only 3 hours a night, trying to secure a crucial $10 million client deal, a deal that represented his absolute final hurdle before securing the coveted, career-defining managing director title. The call came at precisely 3:15 p.m., delivered with cold, clinical finality from the client's counsel. The client had walked away. Marcus, his carefully constructed, fragile edifice of superiority crumbling into dust, immediately entered a state of explosive, narcissistic, and utterly unhinged rage. Elias, adhering to precise, decades-long schedule he had maintained, was slowly, deliberately vacuuming the plush, sound-dampening carpet immediately outside Marcus's expansive, glass-walled office. The soft, rhythmic hum of the vacuum cleaner was a persistent metronome of calm against the rising, internal storm within Marcus's office. Damn it. Damn this entire, pathetic, structurally inept firm. My entire career is ruined because of the colossal incompetence of these anonymous, faceless fools. Marcus roared, his voice cracking with unbearable, hysterical tension. He violently launched a heavy, crystal glass paperweight, a gift from his father, across the room, shattering a framed picture of a yacht he had promised himself he would purchase by Christmas. He then violently slammed his custom-made mahogany desk, a desk that cost the company $40,000. So hard that a collection of crystal, rising star awards, symbols of his fleeting, superficial success, rattled and nearly toppled into the trash. He needed a victim. He needed to find a scapegoat to transfer his colossal, internalized failure. He spun around, his eyes, wild with uncontrollable fury and self-pity, instantly locking onto the easiest, most available, and most defenseless target, the man with the vacuum. "Hey, you, mop and bucket man, get in here now. Look at this mess." I was so stressed, I spilled an entire venti of artisanal coffee all over my special, hand-stitched silk shirt, the one I had flown in specifically from Florence, Italy. Clean it immediately. And that's not all. My brand new, ridiculously expensive Ferrari, the 488 Pista, which cost $500,000, is outside in the executive lot, covered in some ridiculous layer construction dust from the street. You're going to stop what you're doing, go downstairs, and polish it until I can see my own reflection in the paint. Now, stop standing there like a mute, useless statue, you lazy, good-for-nothing idiot. Elias Vance, whose internal net worth exceeded Marcus's lifetime projected earnings by a factor hundreds of thousands, remained outwardly impassive, a perfect statue of quiet forbearance. He slowly, deliberately straightened his back, a slow, controlled movement that pulled the faded, utilitarian blue cotton of his coveralls tight across his powerful, dense shoulders. He then slowly bent down and, using a thick leather-palmed glove hand, retrieved a $100 Cuban cigar that Marcus had angrily thrown onto the marble floor, the exact, precise brand Elias himself used to smoke 20 years ago, before he learned the true, heavy cost of luxury. "I apologize, sir," Elias said, his voice a low, raspy, almost forgotten whisper, perfectly steady and entirely devoid of emotion. "My specific contractual duties are strictly confined to internal custodial maintenance, Mr. Thorne. External vehicle detailing is not within my contractual scope, nor am I currently licensed or insured for that highly specialized work." Marcus, whose mind was far too clouded by his own monstrous ego and panic to even register the professionalism and contractual accuracy in reply, erupted into a cruel, high-pitched laugh that grated against the otherwise pristine silence of the executive floor. "Your scope? Do you honestly think I care about your pathetic minimum wage contract? Your scope is to do everything you are told, you filthy, disposable, anonymous worker, or I will personally ensure your pathetic weekly paycheck is shredded into confetti and your employment history is ruined. You will clean that shirt and polish that car, or I will make sure you never set foot on this floor, this building, or any other respectable establishment again. Do you understand the power I wield over you?" Marcus's eyes held pure, toxic, relentless contempt, the contempt of a man who believes money grant him ultimate, absolute moral and social superiority. Elias simply maintained eye contact, the terrifying, absolute intensity of his gaze subtly, unnervingly unsettling Marcus despite his rage. Elias slowly, deliberately retrieved the heavily soiled silk shirt. He walked back to his custodial cart, opened a small, labeled container of a specialized general fabric cleaner, a product so rare and expensive Marcus wouldn't even recognize its purpose, and meticulously, surgically dabbed away the coffee stain, restoring the silk to its original, perfect state. He returned, laid the now pristine shirt neatly on Marcus's executive chair, and then stepped back 2 paces. There was no visible defiance, no anger, no fear in his entire posture, only a profound, almost ancient sorrow for the man standing before him, a man who had traded his soul for a title. Marcus, swollen with a brief, toxic, misplaced triumph, misinterpreted this perfect, silent obedience as total, final, and crushing submission. As Elias turned to push his cart away, Marcus grabbed a clean, expensive ceramic coffee mug, a new one, since he'd shattered the last, and tossed it onto Elias's cart with completely unnecessary force. "And another thing, clean that mug. But listen closely, Mop Man. Don't you dare touch my personal coffee cup with those disgusting, filthy gloves again. Do you hear me? You are not on my level. You are a necessary utility, not an equal. You never will be." The words were designed to wound, to humiliate, to obliterate the janitor's self-worth, and they landed heavily, only fueling Elias's long-term, calculated strategy for absolute, ethical justice. 2 agonizing, financially volatile weeks after the public humiliation, the financial storm that Elias had known was inevitable finally arrived, a systemic, cataclysmic collapse that threatened to annihilate the entire financial structure of Zenith Capital and send shockwaves through the global market. The Oracle, the company's unbelievably complex, highly censored proprietary trading algorithm, the technological engine responsible for executing hundreds of billions of dollars in trades every second across multiple continents, suffered an unknown, highly sophisticated external attack and instantly, definitively crashed. All global trading accounts linked to Zenith froze in the middle of a trading day. Panic immediately spread like wildfire through the global markets, with immediate violent speculation and reporting that Zenith Capital was facing catastrophic, immediate, and irreversible insolvency. This was not a simple, low-level data hack. It was a devastating, synchronized, high-level market manipulation attempt designed to bleed billions in synchronized, targeted effort and trigger a complete, worldwide systemic financial failure. Marcus Thorne and the company CEO, Mr. Harrison, a man usually defined by his rigid, almost robotic, unflappable boardroom composure, were trapped inside a locked, transparent glass-walled crisis meeting room, the ultimate theater of failure. Harrison was pacing the length of the marble table maniacally, his $1,000 tie now a strangled, useless mess around his throat. Their faces were ashen, reflecting the terrifying, cascading red warnings flashing across the bank of 11-foot monitors. We're hemorrhaging capital at an exponential rate. The losses are accelerating. $800 million confirmed lost in less than 5 minutes. And the rate is doubling. Our internal IT team is completely locked out of the core system. The Oracle's core logic won't even respond to the emergency restart or manual override commands. Harrison screamed, his voice strained with pure, existential, career-ending terror. Elias Vance, the forgotten ghost of the 78th floor, was adhering to his precise, inviolable schedule. He was quietly polishing the imposing glass table immediately outside the high-tension war room, collecting the fallen debris, shredded paper, broken executive pens, the literal scraps of high-stakes corporate failure. The frantic, desperate conversation unfolding inside the glass cage was painfully familiar to him. It was the exact, predictable pattern of systematic self-destruction he had walked away from and discussed 20 years ago. He instantly analyzed the rhythmic, almost musical pattern of the algorithm's complete, systemic collapse. He recognized a signature, a ghost from his past. Elias paused his polishing. He slowly, deliberately discarded a handful of used paper towels into his industrial bin and then, with the unhurried grace of a man who knows the time, walked toward the glass door and, without knocking, stepped inside the high-security room. Marcus and Mr. Harrison, teetering on the absolute edge of a financial nervous breakdown, stared in stunned, impotent silence as a cleaning man interrupted their high-level, multi-billion-dollar financial panic. Mr. Thorne, Mr. Harrison, forgive my interruption, Elias stated, his voice a low, steady, supremely authoritative rumble that contrasted jarringly with the room's escalating chaotic tension. He spoke with the quiet, terrifying certainty of physicists describing a fundamental, unavoidable law of nature. I believe this is not a conventional external brute force attack. There is a deeply embedded, pre-programmed loop error in line 45 of your core Oracle algorithm code, a line I recognize from its original architecture. The algorithm is currently being forced to self-terminate due to a systematic failure. This is being achieved by an outside, sophisticated market bot called the Phantom Script, which is exploiting a subtle, pre-existing thermal vulnerability in your system to escalate the CPU temperature past the critical threshold and trigger that safety error. Marcus and Harrison remain completely paralyzed, their minds unable to reconcile the cleaning man's worn blue uniform with his highly technical, precise, and immediate financial terminology. Marcus was the first to regain the ability to speak, his voice erupting in an uncontrolled inferno of contempt, fear, and self-preservation. What? Thermal vulnerability? Phantom Script? Line 45? Who in God's name do you think you are, you filthy minimum wage moron? You are Janitor. I will have you fired, charged with corporate espionage, and physically restrained and escorted off the premises immediately. Get out of my sight before I have you arrested. Elias stood his ground, his composition absolute, his stillness unnerving. Mr. Thorne, you may issue termination orders in 1 minute. But if you do not implement a precise, temporary fix within the next 60 seconds, this will not be a temporary loss of capital. It will be the total, irreversible, definitive, and public bankruptcy of Zenith Capital, permanently ending your entire career and destroying Mr. Harrison's lifetime reputation. Mr. Harrison, gripped by an absolute primal, career-ending desperation that completely eclipsed his corporate pride, finally ignored his volatile manager's outburst. Wait, how? How can you possibly know about this code? The thermal vulnerability? The Phantom Script? Our best, most highly paid engineers couldn't even catch that detail. Elias met the CEO's bloodshot, panic gaze with his own steady, ancient, all-knowing eyes. I once specialized in writing, debugging, and optimizing this exact type of high-frequency code, Mr. Harrison. Specifically, 20 years ago, I wrote the ethical precursor to the Oracle itself. Marcus erupted in a fresh torrent of cruel, hysterical, fear-laced laughter. Oh, right. The geniuses of Wall Street, now masters of the mop bucket. What's your next revelation? You were the inventor of the internet while cleaning the executive toilets. Get out before I physically drag you to security and press charges for intrusion. Elias knew he had to establish absolute, undeniable physical authority. He executed a final, precise, and highly calculated maneuver to gain total control of the room's focus and psychology. He picked up the soiled ceramic coffee mug, the one Marcus had specifically warned him never to touch with his disgusting gloves, from the counter. He feigned throwing the heavy mug across the room, causing Marcus to instinctively flinch, scream, and physically cover his face in a pathetic display of fear. Elias didn't throw it. Instead, he smoothly, gracefully inverted the mug, peeling back the attached base to reveal a hidden, adhesive, chemical cooling gel pack stuck to the underside. A rudimentary, yet surprisingly effective piece of high-grade, immediate heat management technology. The external bot is deliberately and systematically escalating your system's CPU temperature to a critical thermal threshold to force the loop error. Your system is physically, critically overheating. You need physical cooling applied to the main hardware to stabilize the system and buy us 3 minutes of response time. Harrison, witnessing the strange, desperate, yet undeniably logical and effective action, shouted panicked, immediate commands into a secure phone. IT team, forget the code for now. Rush every available cooling pack, every air conditioner, every piece of cooling solution you have to the main server racks. Now, this is an extreme emergency. The improvised physical intervention stabilized the algorithm momentarily, successfully preventing the immediate catastrophic cascade failure. But the Phantom script was still running, still active, waiting for the thermal respite to end to resume its attack. Marcus, humiliated, terrified, and boiling with impotent rage, grabbed Elias's arm, his fingers digging desperately into the worn blue fabric. If you ever interrupt a management meeting or physically touch me again, I swear, I will ruin your life. I will. Elias gently, but with crushing, unyielding, almost supernatural power, pushed Marcus's grasping, desperate hand away. Marcus stumbled back 3 full steps, his face registering pure shock at the sheer, dormant physical power of Elias's grip and the dense, coiled musculature beneath the simple cotton coveralls. Elias turned back to Mr. Harrison, his tone now shifting from informative to a clear, tactical, military-grade command. The Phantom script is strategically focused on a highly liquid, proprietary group of blue-chip stocks with a market capitalization above $100 million. It is a predictable bot designed to profit from a panic-induced, synchronized sell-off. The only possible way to permanently disrupt the bot's deep, complex predictive modeling and force it to crash is to do the precise, terrifying, and counterintuitive opposite of what the manipulators are anticipating. We must initiate a massive, instantaneous, and initially loss-making acquisition, a coordinated buy of every single one of those targeted stocks. This counterintuitive market shock will shatter the bot's operating model and force a system-wide crash on their end. Harrison stared into Elias's calm, ancient eyes, his mind reeling from the financial implications. The advice was terrifying, carrying a potential multi-billion-dollar upfront loss, but Marcus and the entire IT team had provided absolutely no solution whatsoever. But how fast must this counter-transaction happen? And we need senior director authority for this magnitude of trade. I don't have it. 2 minutes. That is all the time the cooling packs will buy us before the algorithm overheats again. But you cannot execute a transaction of this magnitude, a market-altering decision, without the full written authorization of a senior director. Mr. Thorne's authorization is explicitly required. The global markets are closing in 60 seconds. Harrison turned desperately to Marcus. Marcus, his ego still clinging to a delusion of superiority despite the imminent corporate destruction. defiantly refused. Absolutely not. I will not authorize a multi-billion-dollar, loss-making, career-ending trade based on the lunatic, unsubstantiated advice of a cleaning man. I will not risk my entire career on his insane notions. Harrison screamed in pure, unadulterated, career-ending desperation. Mr. Thorne, we have literally nothing left to lose. We are dead without intervention. Please. Elias played his final absolute and most devastating card, the card that ended all arguments. He walked calmly back to his industrial cleaning cart, reached inside the bottom shelf, a place Marcus had only ever seen storing industrial cleaning chemicals, and pulled out an old, beat-up, dust-covered military-grade laptop. It was a machine built for war and endurance, a relic from the 1990s, built from hardened magnesium alloy. He gently blew the fine layer of carpet dust off the keys. As the ancient machine whirred to life, the screen displayed the password-protected, private login page for an encrypted, decades-old financial platform, a platform only accessible through private, specialized networks. The name emblazoned across the top of the frozen platform was unmistakable, a terrifying, near-mythical legend that everyone on Wall Street had been told was long dead. Elias Vance, the Silent Wolf. Marcus and Harrison were frozen mid-argument, their mouths agape, their minds physically unable to process the terrifying confluence of the two realities, the man in the faded blue coveralls, and the name that symbolized absolute, market-shattering, unstoppable power, the Silent Wolf. The story was financial folklore, a terrifying, enigmatic man capable of moving entire global markets single-handedly, the genius who had mysteriously vanished at the absolute zenith of his wealth and power, never to be seen again. Elias looked directly into Marcus's terrified, paralyzed, pleading eyes, a terrifying, cold indifference replacing his habitual sorrowful gaze. Mr. Thorne, let me clarify the true chain of command for you. The legal ownership of precisely 12.0003% of all Zenith Capital shares purchased quietly over the last 2 years under various anonymous holding companies, is currently legally registered to me, Elias Vance. My voting authority and transactional clearance on this floor supersedes both yours and Mr. Harrison's. I do not need your permission. You are relieved of your duties. Now you will stand down immediately. Elias used his own antique battle-tested laptop, bypassing the entire internal, compromised Zenith system entirely. With a few blistering, precise keystrokes executed in less than 7 seconds, he initiated the multi-billion-dollar counterintuitive acquisition order Marcus had hysterically refused to authorize. The massive, calculated counter-transaction flooded the market in a controlled torrent, instantly crippling the Phantom Script Bots complex predictive operating model. The bot, unable to process the market's sudden, irrational, and coordinated behavior, immediately crashed, triggering a catastrophic failure on the manipulator's side. Zenith Capital's market valuation began to stabilize, then slowly, miraculously rebound within the hour. Elias Vance, the cleaning man, had saved a multi-billion-dollar company from absolute oblivion, using the power of pure, uncorrupted financial genius. Marcus, his arrogance instantly, completely replaced by panicked, groveling subservience, stumbled toward Elias, his hand outstretched in a gesture of pathetic apology. Mr. Vance, I truly had no idea who you were. I am so terribly, profoundly sorry for every word I said and every insult I cast upon you. Elias calmly picked up the damp cloth he had used earlier to wipe the coffee stain off the silk shirt. He gently, deliberately, pressed the cloth against Marcus's suddenly pale, sweating cheek. Not hard, but firm enough to transfer the faint chemical, industrial smell of the cleaning solution. Sorry, Mr. Thorne. Sorry because you chose to judge a man's intrinsic worth by the type of clothing he wears or the mop in his hand. Sorry because you gave me a specific order never to touch your personal coffee cup with my disgusting gloves. At that devastating silent moment, Mr. Harrison, the CEO, finally understood the full, poisonous scale of Marcus's hubris and complete professional failure. He stood up straight, his face etched with cold, uncompromising fury. Mr. Thorne, you nearly bankrupted this company through your profound incompetence and your narcissistic refusal to act on sound, life-saving financial advice. Furthermore, You maliciously and publicly insulted the man who just saved every single one of our jobs and our entire future. I am not asking. I am demanding your immediate and unconditional resignation, effective immediately. Security will escort you out." Elias, the man in the faded blue coveralls, walked back to his custodial cart. His posture was no longer stooped. He stood perfectly straight, looking less like a janitor and more like a seasoned, victorious general who had just won a decisive battle. The cleaning cart, however, remained his powerful, silent symbol. Elias closed the lid of his old, battle-tested laptop, delivering his final, crushing, and unforgettable word to Marcus. "I deliberately walked away from Wall Street 20 years ago, Mr. Thorne, because I grew utterly weary of watching men like you become slaves to status, narcissism, and the corrupt pursuit of money. But I returned today, not for the money, but to meticulously clean up the ethical and financial filth you and your kind created on this floor. Your kind of pollution must be permanently eliminated." Elias Vance, by the overwhelming, immediate decision of the executive board and the majority of shareholders, was unanimously appointed the new chairman and chief ethics officer of Zenith Capital. His first official act was to sign the termination papers for Marcus Thorne, finalizing his absolute corporate ruin. The very next morning, at the customary time of 5 a.m., Elias did not arrive in a custom-tailored suit to claim his massive corner chairman's office. He showed up in the same familiar, faded blue coveralls, carrying the same mop and bucket. He didn't go to the chairman's office. He walked directly to Marcus's newly vacated former office and personally began scrubbing the marble floor, wiping down the mahogany desk, and disposing of the last few pathetic remnants of Marcus's discarded life: the crumpled papers, the expensive, unlit cigars. Elias Vance had proven, definitively and publicly, that true worth and the most profound, enduring power reside not in the title on the door, but in the humility, the precision, and the incorruptible integrity of the work itself. The silent wolf had returned not to seek profit, but to meticulously, physically clean the toxic industry he once silently dominated, ensuring a new era of ethical standards.